Hey, this is EksAyn Anderson. I'm a husband, father, author, speaker, believer in Jesus Christ. And the best advice I ever had was somebody said, no matter the question, love is the answer. And I really believe that's true.
Love is the answer. Was that the Beatles or was that some guy from the 70s or who said that, man?
Well, actually, with someone in my family, my grandmother kind of coined the phrase, and my mom kind of repeated it. But I think my grandmother was the first one that I know of that said it.
Cool. Cool. So, reading your book, man, that was tested at a pretty early age. So, you got to talk about that, man. So, 8 years old, your life changed, man. So, let's talk about that. What happened at 8?
Well, I'll tell you this. I guess I can kind of start at the beginning. When I was young, I used to like to draw these trees, and I draw them with every leaf, every branch, all the detail in the leaves. And I went to school later, and I saw how the other children drew trees. And the way they drew trees is they would draw them with two lines with a poofy cloud on top. You remember?
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, when I saw the way the other children drew trees, I stopped drawing them the way I used to, and I started drawing them the way the other children did. And I found out later that my mom, when she saw this, she cried. And you can probably imagine why. Just, she wanted me to draw trees and be the way that I was originally. Well, fast forward a few years, I'm at a Little League game. By the way, there's a few different ways you can play Little League. You can either be good and hit the ball. If you were pathetic like I was, you just hold the bat out and the ball would hit the bat and fall. It was called a bunt. I had one bunt the entire season as an 8-year-old. But anyway, I'm not here to tell you how bad I was at Little League. There was something that was important after this game. When I was after this game, we went home. My mom complained of a very severe headache. And this wasn't typical for my mom. And my dad became concerned and said, hey, we're going to take mom to the hospital. And I remember standing there in the front room of our home, just a little home I grew up in, giving my mom a hug and telling her I loved her. And then they drove away. Well, I was a little anxious. I'd never seen this happen before, where my dad had to take my mom to the hospital, except for when she was having my brothers and sisters. So it was, not totally abnormal, but abnormal in the fact that she had this headache. And anyway, I went to one of my relatives who happened to be staying there, and I said, is my mom going to die? And he said, no, she's not going to die. She probably just has a migraine. And I said, you promise she's not going to die? And he said, we promise. She's going to be fine. Just take it easy. And I wanted to believe him. So I went downstairs and I climbed up on my bunk bed and started reading this book, and was waiting for my parents to get home, and they didn't get home. And the next morning I woke up, I was still a little anxious, and climbed off my bunk bed, went down to the door of my room, and outside of this room, there's kind of this long family room outside of the room where I was. And as I looked out of this room, I could see my dad on the other side of this room, but something was different. My mom was not there. Instead, there was a friend and another friend and a neighbor and another neighbor. It seemed like half the neighborhood was at our house. And as I walked closer, I could see my dad had been crying. And as I got even closer, my dad kind of gathered the children together, and he said words that I'll never forget. He said, I think our mom is going to leave us. And he was trying to choke back his tears. My mom had suffered a cerebral hemorrhage, which means a blood vessel in her brain had burst, and she was now on life support at the hospital. She's being kept alive by a life support system. And I remember being in that hospital room a couple days later. I could see my mom on this hospital bed. And she had tubes coming out of her nose. And her chest was kind of rising and falling with the help of this respirator. And I was very scared. And it came time that they had to take her off the machine. And when they did, she kind of crinkled up and turned bluish. And, as an 8-year-old boy, I was afraid. I wanted to give my mom a hug, but she didn't look like my mom. And so in terror, I just went and kissed the air and walked out. Well, my mom died that day. And as an 8-year-old boy, I watched her die. I do got to tell you, just so you know a little more of the story, as I walked out of the room, there was after I walked out, there was a friend of the family who happened to be an anesthesiologist in the room. And he said, "You know what, X, when you left the room, after you left, your mom kind of on her own went from being crinkled up to where she kind of opened her arms on her own, no help, almost like she was coming into a beautiful place." But here's my question for you, for any listeners today. My question is, how do you think I draw trees now? And the answer is I draw them the way my mom would want me to. In fact, I share this story with a lot of people. I'm sharing with you figuratively, just by sharing it. I'm drawing trees the way I see them right now, figuratively, right? And so I guess I'm just kind of on a mission to let parents know, there are things that my mom did. I just shared one brief, story, but there are things that she did decades ago. I mean, she died over 36 years ago, that still profoundly affect me. And because they affected me so profoundly, they're affecting her grandchildren who she never met. And I believe her influence will go for centuries, maybe even, you may not be able to quantify exactly what it is because it's so hard to measure, but the actual effect will be massive. So I want parents to know that just the little things they do, the little tiny things they do, really is going to last longer than anything you and I do at work. What we do at work could last for a long time and have an influence. I'm not saying it can't do anything. There isn't a good thing. I'm just saying that the effect we have in our own homes is what's going to make more difference than anything else.
Yeah. Wow. First, dude. Wow. That's a tough lesson to learn at 8, though. That's a really tough lesson to learn at 8, man.
Yeah.
So how did you okay, and you've probably done this and, rewind here, but at 8 years old, you can't, and maybe you can, but I don't think I was prescient enough to understand, wow, like mom wanted trees and I'm going to change now. I mean, was that the moment that change happened for you, that you decided to start embracing drawing trees? Or talk to me, X.
I don't remember the exact age I was when I found out. I found out that my mom had cried, and I can't even remember who it was. I think it may have been an aunt who told me. Somebody said, but what I'm saying is as an adult now, knowing, and I don't remember the exact moment, knowing that was important for her, to have me just, draw trees the way I see them. If it affects me now, I wrote this book. I didn't write it to fulfill a need in the marketplace. I didn't write it to, I just thought, right now I'm going to draw trees the way I see them. And you'll notice on the front of the book, it's got a tree just with branches and everything. And I thought, that's what I'm going to have, because thanks. Thanks, Phil. But that, let me tell you just one more thing to think about. I sometimes will ask people, and I'll say, hey, do you know what your great, say, grandfather did for a living, or grandmother, even if you wanted, two great. So your grandparents' grandparents, do you know what they did? And when I asked this question, almost nobody can tell you. Every once in a while, I get somebody who tells you. But then I remind them, I said, well, you had 16 great grandparents. You know what all of them did? Great grandparents. And they say, most of them can't tell you. Well, here's the good news and bad news for you and I. Our great grandkids, they're probably not going to care what we did for work. They're just not. But one of the things that's interesting, let me give you a really obvious example, and then we can get something less obvious. I live in America. Well, the reason I live in America, and there could be different reasons for other people, but for me personally, is because one of my ancestors, hundreds of years ago, decided to get on a boat. Actually, more than one of my ancestors got on a boat and came to America. Well, that was a choice they made centuries ago, but it's still affecting me today. I mean, it affects the language I speak. It affects my economic opportunities. It affects my educational, affects my religion, it affects everything because that person centuries ago made that choice. Well, there's other choices. I mean, that's an obvious one because it's geographical. You can see it, you can measure it, But there's other things that aren't as observable, it's not as measurable, but they're just as real, just as real. Were they kind? Were they mean? Were they drunk? Were they checked in as a parent or kind of keyed out? Were they present? Those kinds of things can be passed down for a long, 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 long time. And so, the little choices we make, you may not think they're a big deal. I'll tell you, there are things my mom said or did, lots of them, just little things that maybe just took 5 seconds that still profoundly affect me today. And so that's why I'm trying to this message that, hey, you as a parent, you have the ultimate career as far as long-term influence. If you want to do long-term influence in the world, it's not your career. Sorry. It's what you're going to do in your own home, in my belief.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I will tell you in the last couple of years, I've seen that absolutely to be true. I didn't have children until I married my wife, and so now I'm a bonus dad, and I can tell you there's no greater impact than that. And it's so amazing to me to watch my little guy go from like I didn't know him at all to now watching him do things like I do, and it's fun to watch, man, but it's humbling to watch, right? I mean, as we think about that, as we really think about that, that's a lot of influence on another human's life. So let's focus on the love piece of that, man. So how do we, sometimes, right, kids, spouses, family, right, they don't always do what we want them to do, man. So how do you suggest making sure that they know that we love them and that we love them in the way that they need to be loved?
That's a great question. So, one of the things that changed the way I parented, I read, my brother suggested this book called The Power of Positive Parenting. It's by Glenn Latham. I could give you the link. Power of Positive Parenting by Glenn Latham. And this book basically said, if you want to influence behavior long-term, you've got to catch people doing something right. And the premise behind the book is this. It's basically saying behaviors are almost like seeds. So if you can imagine seeds, that you plant in a garden or in a field or something. And attention is like water. And the problem that a lot of us as parents make, and I've made this mistake a ton of times. Let me tell you the mistake I've made a ton of times is if you can think about, you water the behaviors you want to see grow with attention. So if I observe a behavior and I give it attention, that behavior is going to get strengthened. Well, have you ever seen the parent and the kid walks in and the parent says something like this, I can't believe you stayed out till 3 a.m. last night and you didn't make your bed and you left your clothes all over the ground and you're playing too much video games. Well, what that parent's inadvertently doing is they're watering the weeds. They're watering what they don't want to see grow. They're giving these behaviors attention. And the whole point of this book that was so profound, they said the research, this isn't just me saying it or it sounds like a nice idea, but the research shows if you want to influence and love, like you talked, I'm circling back to love here in a bit here, but influence too, long-term behavior, the best way to do it is to wait till they do something right and then give them a lot of attention for it. And then if it's just garden variety bad behavior, I'm not saying you can ignore super bad abusive behavior. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying if it's just garden variety annoying behavior, don't pay attention to it. But when they do something right, pay attention to it. So I tried this with my own daughter. Okay. So I have a great daughter. She's just a good girl all around, but I'll tell you this, she came to my door once when she was young and she goes, this was in the morning before school on a school day. She said, surprise, Dad, I made my bed, I got dressed, I'm ready to go to school. And I'd learned about this positive reinforcement, which is watering the behaviors with attention you want to see grow. And I went to my wife in the closet and I said, you know what? Let's give this a lot of attention. And she said, okay. So I went out there and I said, hey, look, your bed looks good. You made your bed. Wow. And you got your lunch done. You got dressed for school. Well, it was really interesting. We gave it a lot of attention. My wife kind of laid it on thick too. Well, she did the behavior again. And we kept giving it attention. She did the behavior again. We're trying to water the behavior you want to see grow. Well, what would have been less effective is for me to wait till she sleeps in, doesn't make her lunch, doesn't make her bed, and then storm into her room and say, how many times do I have to tell you to get up and make your bed and do this? That's just, even research-based, not as effective. And so our kids, our spouses, people you meet on the street, people you work with, people you walk by when you're just going places, people are thirsty to be acknowledged for what they're doing that's good. So catch them doing something right. And when you do, that behavior, I mean, I can tell you stories in business. I can tell you stories in my family. I can tell you stories where just catching people doing something right. And by the way, I've made the mistake hundreds of times millions of times, probably hundreds of that. I mean, a lot of times where I've caught people doing something wrong. And I'm trying to change that. I've noticed it's so much more effective.
Yeah. So that starts with awareness that, continues with practice, but, to your point there about, about some of the bigger things. I mean, how do we stay in love when something goes sideways, man? Some big thing goes sideways. How do we demonstrate that love?
I love this question, Phil. This is like the best question you could ask me. So there's this other guy that I got to tell you, my dad has stage 4 lung cancer. So he been a great guy, great influence on me. But when I was young, he kind of bribed me. He said, I want you to read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective. And I think he paid me $20 for it. And I, being a kid, just thought, oh, I can make $20, which was a lot of money when I was, a young kid. Anyway, but there was something in that book that stood with me for a long time. And Stephen Covey tells this story, and I hope I may not be quoting it exactly right, but let me tell you the general gist. He was at a conference and somebody came up to him after this conference and said this to him. He said, I don't love my wife anymore. And Stephen Covey was kind of surprised. And he goes, well, then love her. And the guy goes, I don't think you heard me. I don't love her anymore. We've fallen out of love. She doesn't love me. I've fallen in love with her. We have 3 kids. We're probably heading for a divorce. And it kind of concerns me. And Stephen Covey looked at the guy and said, if you're not feeling it, that would be a good reason to love her. And the guy goes, how do you love somebody you don't love? And Stephen Covey looked at him and said, my friend, you're acting like love is a feeling. Love isn't a feeling. Love is an action word. It's a verb. But if you do the verb, the feeling will follow. By the way, this is super, super profound because it's this principle that we can lead our feelings with our actions. In other words, that we can do something before we feel like it, and later we'll feel like it. Let me give you one more example about this principle. I have this friend named Brody who used to live in the neighborhood I used to live in. He used to do this Spartacus workout, which I understand is this workout that it's all kinds of muscle confusion, all kinds of crazy stuff. He got to the end of this workout, and when he was done, he said, I was so sore, I could barely walk. And he goes, but somehow the next day I did it again because I just felt like I needed to. And he goes, the next day I did it again. And the next day I did it again. And the next day I did it again. He goes, but every time I did it, I was just so sore I wanted to die. I just didn't want to do it. But I kept doing it. And he goes, it was really interesting. I hated it. I didn't want to do it. But I kept doing it because maybe a pride thing or was just committed to it. He said, I got to around week 2.5 or 3. And he goes, something changed. I got to the end of the workout one day, and I can't remember if it was week 2.5 or 3, but somewhere in there. I got to the end of the workout. And at the end of this workout, I felt like I was just getting started. And so that day I did the workout twice. He goes, and the next day it happened again. I did the workout again twice. And so this principle that if you don't feel love for your spouse, let's just say you're not feeling it. I think it happens in marriages all the time. People they just don't feel it for a while. Well, how do you get the feeling back? Do you just think about this? If I want to exercise and I just sit on the couch, can you imagine just sitting there saying, I'm not going to exercise until the feeling just kind of wafts by? That's not how it works. You got to get off the couch and go work out and do your running and run, even when you don't feel like it. And in a few weeks, you'll start getting these endorphins and the runner's high, and you'll be like, man, I got to run. And you'll want to run. It's the same thing, the exact same principle with your spouse. You don't feel like loving your spouse? That's a signal. You need to go give her a back rub or go rub her feet. Go take the kids so she can have some time alone because she's stressed out, or go do the dishes, or go bring her some flowers or a gift or whatever to do something that you know she likes to love her, even when you're not feeling it. Same with your kids, with the troubled teen, with anybody, because you can act first and the feeling will follow. And that's a profound thing that I think a lot of in our society, we get a little bit backwards. A lot of people say, well, you should just do whatever you feel, thinking that it's out there. But the truth is you can actually create the feeling with your actions. And if you just base your feeling, if it's just, you think whatever I feel is going to happen, you've kind of abdicated that responsibility. The truth is we're responsible for our feelings. We can choose how we feel. And a lot of people may not like that, but it is the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a lot more agency, I think, than we give ourselves. I think you're absolutely right with that, X. So with that, right. The book is What I Want My Children to Know Before I Die. So how do we help them understand love? I mean, is it just example, or is it words, or a blend, or what do you find, man?
You mean for our kids, you mean?
Yeah, for our kids, right? If we're talking about, what do you want your children to know before I die? How do you get there, man? How do they understand that and conceptualize that and embrace that?
That's such a great question. And here's the thing. I really believe that no matter the question, love is the answer, but I'm not sure I even get love completely. I'm trying, right? But I've got to like do the best I can as a dad, like the example of like trying. So, just little things we do are going to pick up. How do I love my wife? Well, sometimes I blow it. Sometimes I'm great. How do I love the person on the side of the road? Do I just pass by them, or do I try to help them out when they want some help? How do I love the people who are in our neighborhood? And sometimes I do a good job and sometimes I don't. And so I think for us to teach that love is the answer, somebody said this, and I don't know who said it, but they said there's 3 things that are important when teaching people. The first one's example, the second one's example, the third one's example, because we're saying so much more. And let me hit on this for just a second here, if that's okay. My brother, who happens to be a really smart guy, and he went to Harvard and got a degree in education at Harvard. He and I love to talk about education. So we're talking about like, what's the best way to teach? So I was talking to him once and I said, what do you think the best way to educate people is? If you had no cap on spending, if you could do anything you want, and there was no limit on money, no limit on anything, how would you do it? And we talked about it. We talked about, like, let's just say you wanted to be a hedge fund manager, right? So a hedge fund manager, I think they're the top paid people in the world, or at least one of them. I think they may be the top paid people. Right now, to be a hedge fund manager, you got to do really well in college so you can get a really good GMAT score. You might need a 4.0 or close. So you can go to an Ivy League school and learn business, and you're going to spend a few years at least there. And then you're going to go on and you're probably going to spend 2 decades working for these prestigious firms, trying to work your way up. And maybe in a few decades, you might be a hedge fund manager. But we came up with this idea, but what if instead of going through all that, what if you learned some basics, but then you were able to just follow around the very best hedge fund manager in the world? What if they just said, you can just follow him around? You can sit in his board meetings. You can see when they buy and sell things. You can see the conversation. You can listen to his phone conversations. You can see when he hires, what he fires, what he says, what his strategy is. And do you think that you might be able to learn faster by just following around a hedge fund manager? The answer is, if you were to follow around the person you wanted to be like, just follow him around, you could probably become a hedge fund manager and learn it really well. Maybe even better than if you went to the school that, they're paying these guys maybe, I don't know, $100,000 a year to teach you. But here you're learning from a guy who's making billions, and you're seeing what he or she really does on the ground. And I thought about this. I thought, you know what? Following around the person you want to be like, that is a great way to teach. I mean, if I wanted to be a doctor, I could follow around the top doctor. I could follow around the top lawyer or the top hedge fund manager, or the top business person or whatever. And then after this conversation, I thought, yeah, that's probably it. I think that probably is one of the best ways. But I'm sitting at this stoplight after I've talked to my brother, and there's this truck that went through, and I'm thinking, and it hit me. I'm like, the best way to teach people has been around for thousands of years. It's called parenting. We have little people who want to be like us, follow us around for like 18 years or more sometimes, right? Or, they follow us around and they want to be like us. Well, this is the good news and this is the bad news. I'm going to just spiral off for just a second. I remember I used to sell real estate, and remember that we're in this back in the 2008, 2009 time when the real estate market had crashed. I was working for this builder, and they were desperate for sales, and eventually got so desperate, we decided to go out and knock doors on these apartment buildings to see if we could get people to buy these homes, because nobody was buying. Everyone was afraid. Anyway, they sent us out 2 and 2 for liability reasons. I remember I knocked on this door, and this little kid came to the door and said, "My mom told me to tell you that she can't come to the door because she's in the bathroom." And then from behind the door, the mom, who was obviously not in the bathroom, said, "Okay, now, sweetheart, shut the door." Right? Now, it sounds like a funny story. At first, I thought it was funny. Later, though, much later, as I thought about this, I thought, that's kind of sad in a way, because I don't think that mom got up that morning and said, "Today, I'm going to use the best way to teach people, to teach my kid to lie." I don't think she thought that. She didn't think, "Today I'm going to get up and just teach my kid to tell lies." But she did. She got up and she said, "Look, if you don't want to talk to someone, or, I don't blame people for not wanting to talk to a salesperson. I don't blame them. But I'm saying, but just little choices like that we don't realize that kid might think, hey, it's okay to lie just because I saw mom do it that day at the door. That could be passed down for a long time. So we really got to think, like, what am I teaching with my example? And sometimes that can be scary. Like, did I really teach my kid that? I hope it's good. So I hope we can help parents think, let's really start looking, what are we doing? Because our kids are watching us. They are watching us. They are watching.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. Whether we see them watching or not, they're always, always watching us. So X, how do we get them started on love, man? As we kind of wrap this up here, brother, how do we get them started on the love train so that they can be more love and less harm?
I think if we could teach our kids that you can lead your feelings and to just choose to love others, even if you're not feeling like it, show them examples, take them to do things to love others, show them how to, love by treating our spouses good. And I blow this sometimes. I'm not great at this. My wife could tell you I blow it a lot, but sometimes, like, show how do I treat my wife? How do I treat my kids? How do I treat the people in the neighborhood? And then have conversations about it. I don't know if it's rocket science. There's not some huge silver bullet. I think it's kind of the little things that happen each day that build up, and over time they can learn it by our example.
Yeah, over time, absolutely. Absolutely, right? Each thing that we do, it adds up and it adds up and it adds up. Good stuff, man. So X, I've got to ask you, man, before I let you go, you have the most unique name that I've met, EksAyn Anderson. So
Yeah.
how'd you get, like, is there family tradition behind that, or how did you get that cool name, man?
Well, I'll first say, they say it's Swedish, but I've got to tell you, there is not a single person in Sweden. I have been to Sweden. Nobody in Sweden is named EksAyn. And anybody in Sweden who's watching this could tell you, nobody in Sweden is named EksAyn. It is a family name a little bit. So I have some people, I think there's 4 of us that have ever lived. Okay. My wife calls me X. And I always joke around, it's probably not a good thing if your wife calls you X, but I'm my wife's ex and we're married. So I might, believe it or not, Phil, I passed it on to my son. We've got little X, we call him. Or sometimes I call him Big X because he's just a good guy. But anyway, yeah, it's a unique name, EksAyn. If you ever meet anybody else with that name, they're probably in my family. In fact, almost
There,
100% sure they're in my family.
there you go. Well, makes it easy to remember where to find you, X. You find you at EksAyn.com. That's EksAyne.com. And
Yeah, it's
if
actually
they
no
want
E.
to,
Sorry.
oh no,
You're
how the
good.
hell did I spell that
See,
wrong? I'm reading
it's
on
so hard to
screen.
spell. No, it's so hard to spell.
EksAyn. Sorry, X. Yeah, it's
EKSAYN.
even
You
on
got
screen and I still can't read today, right? So EksAyn.com. My bad, man. And so, if people, is there a way to talk to you there? Do you have a favorite social network where they can get to know you a little more?
Sure. Yeah, they're welcome to reach out on any of the social networks. All the main ones that they're welcome to reach me out, or just yeah, EksAyn.com, like you said, EksAyn.com. They can just ping me there. And we'll try to get in touch with them. So thank you for
Cool.
putting that.
Yeah, absolutely. And congrats on writing the book, man. It's what I want my children to know before I die. This was Exane Anderson. And make sure, folks, love is the answer. And it's a verb. So even if you don't feel like it, it's all the more time to love. Thanks, X.